evening, everyone. We are going to go ahead and start the meeting. It's the Historical and Architectural Review Board meeting. Today's Wednesday, October 4th. It is just after 6 o'clock, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, if everyone would stand. All right, we have quite a few items of new business, so I'm going to ask each of you when you come up to give us a description of the project, focusing on what we are going to be able to see from public right-of-ways. So if the majority of your project is behind the house and won't be seen by the public, let us know that up front and we'll be able to move a little bit more quickly through your application. So the first one today is HARB 2017-16, which is 224 South Aberdeen Avenue. This one is resubmitted, I believe, from last month's, September 6th meeting.
Good evening, Mark Janicek. Thank you for allowing me to come back and to continue our discussions on 224 Aberdeen. What we have done is gone back, taken a much more thorough review of the design guidelines, have put together some more collateral information insofar as photographs and some details of the homes that are in an immediate 1 to 2 block radius of the Aberdeen house. Primarily the images that were sent to you in the package earlier in the past week to 2 weeks are photographs of houses that are on Windermere and Aberdeen. And I think that the questions that were raised by the group primarily were, we're proposing a change from a gable dormer to shed dormers. And I believe the primary discussion was, are there shed dormers? Are we changing some of the architectural fabric of the homes in the area? And so what I had endeavored to do is walk the community and in fact found a dozen plus or minus of examples of similar shed dormers on multiple different styles of period architecture. So again, refresh, we have the gable dormers and then the proposed shed dormer. And so what I have here in this photograph is in fact a shed dormer. And we have another example on Windermere with a shed dormer.
Can you give him a handheld one, please?
It's right here. Okay. Testing. Very good. So again, shed dormer. Another example, shed dormer. And I'll also point out on this one, because it's a pretty good angle of, we had talked about our curved, swooped, curled, not sure exactly what the correct terminology might be, but the flat picture of, or drawing of the dormers certainly don't illustrate the curve very well. So I'll use this to represent or give you an example of what I meant by the curved dormer. So you'll see that this has a nice little gentle swoop to it, and that is the same shape that we intend or hope to use on our shed dormers. Another example of a shed dormer. This is the house next door, which you see a shed dormer here, and I think we might have another photograph because they in fact, yeah, here we go. They do have shed dormers on the front. Unfortunately, the tree hides it, but there's a shed dormer right here. There's a shed dormer on the left, another shed dormer over here. I think we already saw this photograph, different angle. Another photograph with a shed dormer, not quite as much of a pitch in the roof. So that grouping of photographs obviously represent that it's very common to see shed dormers in this immediate neighborhood and part of the South Wayne Historic District. I have many other comments, but I guess I should give the committee an opportunity to ask me some more questions so I could give you some specific answers.
Hello, and thank you for being so very thorough about doing an architectural survey of the neighborhood. I really appreciate that you took the time to do that. I still don't see too many examples of the curved roof, just that one that you gave, but plenty of examples of the straight roof. Could that be a compromise?
There are many of these shots are curved. It's just hard to illustrate unless you have a side angle, and I didn't want to trespass on the properties by walking in the neighbors' properties to shoot. So it's a combination of both straight and curved, and I think that the curved is a much more aesthetically pleasing, appropriate style for what we're trying to accomplish with the project. I think that a straight dormer is, may I say, taking the easy way out. There's much more craftsmanship involved in a curved dormer. It has a much more aesthetic appeal in a curved dormer, and I don't think that we would want to diminish a detail. I think we'd be more pleased with complementing and adding that detail to the project.
I actually like the curve look. I think that does add an element of sophistication, for lack of better words. And I like your design and what you, like a flat design, but I like the design that you have put together with the gambrel. Is that the new roof you have on the, over the doorway? What's that called?
That's just a curved shed dormer would be the correct term. If you're speaking to the shed dormers, the porch
This
roof.
one, the porch roof.
Well, that's actually a shed too, not to confuse, but.
Oh, okay. So it's sloping.
Yes.
Okay. But I think that the curve that you're showing on that is matching the curve of the shed.
That's correct.
My question is just the style of house that is more colonial and switching it over. Do you have any maybe background on that or
Yes.
more information to help us make that decision?
Sure. So after we met in our last meeting, I really wanted to get some more historic background and education on the period. And I asked a individual, I think a very well-respected architectural historian in the community, to come over and give me some guidance as what her take would be on appropriateness. And the person that I'm referring to actually provided a synopsis of our meeting, and that was enclosed in the package, and I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to look at that, but I'm happy to highlight, maybe not read the whole thing, but highlight some of the points for all of our benefit. And that's a document that's labeled as Comments on 224 South Aberdeen, and it would look like this document, just in case you're looking for it in your package. So in any case, it was very interesting and educational to me in that there are some very specific periods of historic architecture in our community. And the one that most relates to us in the South Wayne District, the period of significance, as it's described, is from the 1870s to 1910. And that particular period of significance has a very defined architectural style. And when we move beyond those periods, there's a little more latitude, and also we see a change in some of this craftsman that took place. So the fact that this house was built in the 1920s is just a few years, obviously, behind that or beyond that significant period of time. And what was expressed to me is that we will find in our community and other areas that it was now a new generation and a new style that has evolved from some of the more ornate specific period. And what we're seeing in these periods is craftsmen putting their own flair, and what they're doing is they're taking bits and pieces of other houses, their neighbor's house, the house down the street, and they're incorporating, and it's getting more of a unique to itself design. So to your point on that is it was very common to see architectural styles evolve into their own specific style. And in fact, that evolution is consistent in 1920s, and so we're taking this to a new artisan revival design, but basically we're implementing the same practices that would have been very common in that 1920s and beyond period. So it would have been very common to see a change of a specific design to a more personal design by the craftsman or architect of those periods. So that's one area that was clearly defined and expressed to us. Another thing that was expressed to us was, if we look at the design guidelines, are we staying within those design guidelines? And so what was brought to our attention is there's a whole list in the HARB design guidelines. And again, I won't read all of these, but I'll pick up some of them. So the first and most, not most important, but the first item says, preserving the overall relationship between the width of the front of the building and the height of the front of the building. We've not changed that at all. We have maintained the exact width and the exact height. The next thing is preserving the overall relationship amongst the buildings within each district's development pattern. Again, we really haven't changed any of that relationship whatsoever. We're actually getting it closer to the neighboring properties that exist right now. Preserving overall relationship with width and height of windows and doors. So this is a very interesting comment because we have not changed the height of the windows or doors. We've not changed the openings whatsoever. We've not changed the count of the windows and doors. What we've actually done is we've changed the roof line as it's specific to that, but the windows and doors openings have not changed at all. So we've maintained that area. The next item is preserving the existing entrances and projections where possible. I won't read the rest because it talks about altering them. We haven't changed the existing entrance or projections at all. Again, we've maintained all of that. Then we move to the next one, preserving architectural details, including but not limited cornices, roof pediments, lintels, arches, balustrades, and chimneys. Same thing again, we've not changed any of the roof lines, lintels, arches, there's no balustrading, but the chimneys, that's all been maintained. Moving on to the next one, and this is an interesting because our historian had some comments on that, preserving roof shapes such as gable, mansard, hip flat, and or other roof shapes. So what was brought to our attention is that we have not changed the primary roof lines whatsoever. What we're doing is we're changing dormers, and yes, those are roof lines, but this ties back into the artisan revival movement, where in fact you're altering to a style that is respectful to the other homes, and in fact we're pulling some of the elements in of the other homes in the community. So I think we've got that in check. The next one is preserving compatibility with surrounding buildings. We're actually making it much more compatible to the surrounding buildings than what it is right now. And I think there's an 8th point and my page is cut off. Sorry about that. So I think we tried to address these points and bring to the attention that the primary guidelines in our own ordinance are being met here, and in fact are complementing in almost all cases of what the intent of the guidelines are. Yes.
Are you? I know. I've got a very loud voice. That's what my children said. Anyway, I think you've done your homework. I think you got the best possible person in to go over the various styles. From my background, I can say that there was very little domestic architecture built after the crash in 1929, so that when realtors tell me, oh, it was built in 1935, almost always I'll go up and turn over a toilet and find the 20th century method of dating houses. If I have an original toilet, flip the lid and look at the date, it's almost always going to say late 1920s as opposed to 1930s. But it is, she's right about the, Beverly, writing about the eclectic style, which is one of the things I think I mentioned when this first came up. It is, there was a period, it was the centennial that sparked an interest in colonial architecture, which until that time, they couldn't tear down fast enough. And if you want to see, the Ebenezer Maxwell Mansion is probably the epitome of the Victorian style. But as you approach 1900, the colonial revival started to come in, and they didn't know what they were doing, so they'd put a Palladian window somewhere on the side of the house, but considered it to be colonial revival. But as you got into the 1920s, you not only got beautifully built houses, but very much more colonial with a better understanding of symmetry. Symmetry was dreaded in the Victorian period. I mean, it was anything asymmetrical went, and anything symmetrical was dull and deserved to be torn down, which is why we lost a lot of our most important colonial period architecture in Philadelphia in the Victorian period. And then we got to the colonial revival, and we couldn't tear down the Victorian fast enough. So we go in cycles. But if it were a horoscope, this particular period when this house was built was basically, it would be on the cusp,
Right.
borrowing elements of each, and you can see it everywhere in the neighborhood.
Right. Thank you.
But I think you did your homework.
Okay.
At this time, unless the board has any more comments, I'd like to open it up to the public. Is there any public comment?
A motion for recommendation for certificate of appropriateness.
Is it seconded? A second? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 votes for the certificate of appropriateness. Good luck in front of the commissioners.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, so the next order of business is HARB 2017-17. This is 400 Oak Lane, second-story addition above the sunroom, extending the pent roof, changing the bay window, and quite a few other things. Add new 2-car garage. If you'd like to give us a synopsis of what's going on, again, as I mentioned earlier, let us know what is able to be seen from the public right away.
Good evening. I'm Jeffrey Martin from JTA Associates, architects here in Wayne. We have 2 street frontages, so we have 2 public right-of-ways that can be seen. One is on Oak Lane, that's the front of the house. Beechwood, Beech Tree is the other. Is this on? Beech Tree is the other frontage that we have. Along Oak Lane, we have 2 major proposals. The existing 1-story sun porch has a walkout balcony or deck on the 2nd floor, and we propose to add a 2nd floor to that. There is a hip roof on the front of the house, and we propose to remove the hip and bring the existing roof framing out to create a gable. The front skin on that gable will be the pebble dash stucco, which you see on the side of the house. It's a side that's not facing the right-of-way, but it is there, and we're matching it. These 2 windows in the gable match the 2 gable windows on the back of the house. So we're trying to bring existing elements that are already on the house and bring them back to other portions of the house. The other frontage that we have is on Beech Tree. Changes along Beechtree are less dramatic. The front that faces Oak Lane, you'll see the existing hip that we're going to straighten to become a gable. In the existing, what was the library, we're turning that into the dining room. There are two flanking casement windows that we are going to extend and put in new windows to match the center window. We're going to remove a double staircase, turn the door into a window, and then we propose to add a two-car garage, bringing the architecture from the house with the same, gable detail that has the pebble dash stucco and the two matching windows. Other refinements on here are the windows are a little haphazard. You'll see some windows have shutters, some do not. We're proposing to organize that with all single windows having the shutters, but keeping the shutters off the gang window.
I'd like to make a comment. As I saw this property from street level, this house is a gabled-in type of house.
Yes,
And,
this house has been added on to many times.
I was like, okay,
Yeah,
if this is a gabled-in type of house, and it's like a little bit, it's been transformed.
many times, yes.
Yeah, so I like the idea of what you're going to do there with the gabled roof in front, because many of the neighbors have that prominent gabled roof of the
Yes.
gabled inn. So I like that. I think that's an excellent thing to do.
It gives the house a little more presence.
I think that it does too, but again, looking at it from a historical perspective, to bring it back to its original form of a gabled inn, which there are other examples on that street which are still in their original form.
Right.
Anybody else on the board have any questions or comments? No? Anyone in the public have any comment they'd like to make about this project? Looks like we have one.
I would just like to make one other comment. After viewing this property, the side on Beechwood,
Beechtree?
yeah, the exterior there is relatively worn. So what they're proposing, it's going to be a much better visual impact, for sure.
Greg, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just a quick comment. Hey, how are you?
Okay.
Could I take a look at those front elevations?
Sure. It's next page down. There you go.
Okay, so, yeah, you're right. Oh, thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, this was a gabled in. You can tell, some of the windows are in the places, and yeah, I think yeah, there you go. So I'm not exactly sure what happened. There may have been a fire at some point that knocked off the characteristic equilateral triangle on the front, which is repeated multiple times on Oak Lane. But I think my only comment would be that the fan light above the door is a very colonial kind of detail and not characteristic of the block, at least. There may be other examples in the district, but I think that's something that's a detail that's both very prominent and, in my mind, not very characteristic. So that's all. Thanks.
I would agree with that comment. Any other suggestions for that door area instead of having that?
We're just trying to give it a little bit more of a formal front door feeling to that. We can certainly investigate other possibilities for that. Right now, it's just a flat, as you can see in the upper elevation, it's just a flat fascia along there. We could maintain that flat fascia.
I would recommend that.
I have a question. When was the house built?
Do you know the date? In the 1880s? between 87 and 89.
Go ahead, ask the question.
Yeah,
But
there's telling me between 1887 and 89. And our understanding is that the house looked more like the other houses on the block, more along this style. But with all the renovations, it's changed its character. Yeah.
I believe what they're proposing, at least as far as proportionally, is in sync with roof lines, et cetera, definitely.
So I feel like we might have a little bit of a question about that detail above the front door. Would you rather we could either make a motion and see if we can pass everything with the condition that it stays the same? Or
we would. Yeah, I
we
think
can give
we
you
would.
continuance and you can kind of think about that design and come back next month?
Yeah, no, I think we can take the motion that we leave it as a flat, uninterrupted pent roof.
Okay.
I motion to recommend a certificate of appropriateness with the recommendation for the roof above that side door. With the condition to maintain the roof above the side door. Okay. Do I have a second?
All right, so we have a seconded. So the motion was a recommendation of certificate of appropriateness with the condition that the roof line above the front door stays the same. And if you have another design you want to use in the future, feel free to bring that back to us to take a look at.
Okay,
But
thank
for
you.
now, we can all vote, and all those in favor on that motion, please indicate. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so we're good with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Quick question for you. We didn't really talk about the garage. Is any of that visible from the public right-of-way?
Yes, that front facade with the garage doors and the gable is visible from Beach Street.
Okay, would you show us a quick image of that just to make sure we don't have any reservations about that piece?
This is the Beech Tree facade right here. This is the house. And we have 24 feet between, and then we have the garage. No, there's a pull-off, just a little pull-off off of Beech Tree, but there is a pull house and a garden shed on the property already. No, the garage that you're thinking about is on the other side of that little creek.
No, that's not.
There's,
Garage-like structure that was right there on Beech Tree.
this structure is not a garage here. That's actually a pull house.
Okay.
Back there. There is a driveway to it and the little pull off here. And there is a garage, you see in the pictures. We could include a picture of the neighboring garage. This is over on Wayne Avenue, North Wayne Avenue. Is that? But yeah, that's on North Wayne.
Could you show us the design one more time, please?
Thanks for showing that to us. I think we're okay, and our recommendation stands as is. We just want to make sure
Okay,
we
no, we
took a look at
understand.
that.
All right,
Thank you
thanks.
very much.
Sure.
Okay, next on our list is HARB 2017-18. This is 416 St. David's Road. A new detached garage, some driveway expansion, and removal of a driveway in front of the house.
Hi, my name's Kevin Cahill. I'm the homeowner. I apologize. Our architect, Peter Batchelor's out of town, so I'll do my best to explain everything. So we are, our house, we're new homeowners to the area. We moved last August. Our house was originally built in 1910. It was actually originally two houses connected, and in 2007, the prior homeowner, renovated the whole house and made it one single house. So there is currently a single, like a car-and-a-half garage, which is very old, and some people have told us it's not safe. It's, the framing is coming detached from the foundation, so we'd like to build a new two-car garage with a second level you can see there. I would say it's our current garage. I sent you guys a lot of pictures. Our current garage, I'd say, is like maybe 50-60% visual from the front right away. The new garage is going to, because the current garage where it's located is actually, it's illegal per the current zoning. It's like right up to our neighbor's garage. And it's got to be, my understanding, secondary structures need to be 10 feet, from the boundary line. So it's going to get moved back and like more into the middle of our yard. So it's going to be less visible from the right of way, like from the front of our house. It might be visible from, I sent you guys a picture from the view from Orchard Way, like a side view. Like right now you can't see our garage at all because it's covered by our neighbors. But once, if this is approved and built, you might be able to see the second level of it. We think that this garage, it's going to have a gambrel roof, very similar to our current house. It's the outside material will look very similar to the current house, and we think it, will be a big improvement visually over what's there now. The only other thing, because we're moving the garage back away from the boundary line, we need to expand the driveway. And as a result, we're going to remove the circular driveway in the front to make up for the additional impervious coverage, which I think that actually will be an improvement because it's, from what I've seen in the area, there's not many houses with the front circular driveway. So that will be kind of like restoring it back to what it was.
I'd like to comment on that because I thought that was very interesting. Did your house participate in Porch Fest?
Yes.
I thought it did. I think you had the country singer there.
We did, yeah.
Okay, the driveway to me seemed like it was a little in a way.
Yeah.
But I would just like to comment on the driveway and also the lawn. With setbacks are really for the neighbors because it helps to have a setback because you have to maintain your property. That was one of the original thoughts about having setbacks, especially in these historic districts. I won't bore you with the details, but there was an absolute reason considering what was happening in Philadelphia at the time. So with this circular driveway taken out, and I don't think I saw another one on that street. For the homeowner, I think it's a very good economic benefit because now instead of having to maintain the driveway and the lawn, the homeowner only has to maintain the lawn. And you'll have more space for Porch Fest. Hopefully it will continue And so my comment, I'm fine with that being done.
Okay.
Welcome to the area, and I think that you did a wonderful job. You have maintained a number of the design characteristics of the primary structure of your house. Obviously, when a lot of these houses were built, garages were secondary in nature. They were done, it was much simpler. However, I don't have an issue with the fact that there is a little bit more of an elaborate design than I think would have initially been done, because you've put in, your architects have put in a lot of mirrored aspects that we can find overall throughout the neighborhood as well as with the house. So I applaud you. I like this.
Thank you.
I have a question about impervious surface. Have you gotten a determination as to whether or not this would be approved based on impervious surface?
I don't think that's within our purview, so we don't
No,
have
I'm
to.
just asking because if we approve the design with the additional.
We're not, yeah.
Well, my understanding is that the house was previously has a variance approved because I believe it's like, I think you have to be 30%, and the house has approved a variance currently for 33, and like what we're adding and taking out is actually, we're taking out more, so we're gonna be fine, yeah, so.
I have a question about the design. I think it looks beautiful what you want to do, and if it's going to match your house better material-wise, I think that's going to be a positive to your property. My one question is, you have the three windows all together. Is that somewhere on your house? Are you like copying that design from your house?
That's a good question. I know that my architect was trying to do that. I don't really know. I mean, I don't see that on my house. I mean, and you can see on the sides and the back, you have windows that, like, 3 on the sides that are close together. Like the map picture there at the top. Yeah, that's the east side, yes. That's a double window, that's a double window. Or no, sorry, you know what, that is a triple off of my kitchen. Off of my kitchen it is.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public?
I would like to make the motion to recommend the commissioners award a certificate of appropriateness.
Do I have a second? Seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All in favor. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
Thank you.
All right, next on our list is HARB 2017-19. This is 326 Luella Avenue, new garage and pool house building, and some modifications to the existing areas.
Good evening. I'm Christopher Miller with John Milner Architects. And I wanted to, I guess from the beginning, I should state that there is a new garage that is being proposed, which is visible from the public way. And the garage, the frame garage that is in the corner, which we have proposed to remove is also visible from the public way. There are two small additions to the back of the house which are not visible from the public way. So I thought maybe I would start by talking a little bit about the frame garage that's at the south side of the site, southwest corner. I guess you have in front of you or read sort of our statement about the garage, which basically the things that I kind of wanted to highlight for you. Number one is our client has owned the house for a couple of years, so they're relatively new client or new owners of the property. They do not use the garage, and one of their concerns is that it's unstable. So from the beginning, we had a structural engineer, Gary Gradell, structural engineers, come out and look at the frame garage because we had the same concern in visiting the garage. And he basically, in his letter, which we submitted with the package, explained in some detail the condition, the poor condition of the garage, structurally speaking. So one of the things that I think probably goes into that is the garage has been modified over time. It was probably a stable at one point because it is an older structure. We don't know the actual date on the structure, but there was a porch that came out towards Luella. So its original appearance has been modified from what it was when it was first built. So there was I guess that would be on the east side of the frame garage facing Luella, there was a porch.
I'd like to make a comment on that. When I also saw this property and did a little bit of research, and then I read that letter from your engineer about the concerns of safety. I think in that letter, that property, part of the property was called a carriage barn. Okay, and then as I completed the research, and then this house is magnificent looking, and then the architect was Horace Trumbauer.
1892.
Yes. Well, I think, in my opinion, he became more famous after he died than when he was living. But obviously, for his time, a lot of work for the Gilded Age at the time. But my concern here was, I thought, after reading your material, after doing this research, I thought, is there a possibility that carriage barn was an original outbuilding when this house was built and designed by Horace Trumbauer? Can you comment on that? Because I didn't get that answer from what you provided, but it seemed to me that a lot of clues were telling me that maybe this was original. Maybe he also designed this carriage barn when the house was first built.
We've come across no records that would say one way or the other whether Horace Trumbauer was involved with the design of the carriage or the stable, the carriage barn. So I don't have any record whether it is or it isn't. I mean, we did come across one historic photograph. I believe it's undated, but it doesn't shed any light on whether it was a Horace Trumbauer designed stable.
Wouldn't that show up on the, wouldn't that show up on the old Pennsylvania Railroad? The great maps that they have.
Yeah, I've looked
readily accessible on Henderson Road.
It may. I have not personally checked.
I mean,
that. I don't know that-
they certainly showed up on our,
Mhm.
on our street. Every little outbuilding
Yes,
showed
and
up.
I've looked at them in the past. I have not checked to see if this building, I do know that the building is early. So my guess is if I looked at one of those maps from the early to mid-20th century, that it's possible it would be there as a frame building.
I was also thinking, too, another clue could be just the terminology that, that you've used in the material that you sent us, carriage barn. That leads me to believe that more so this is pre-automobile era, where in the day when this house was built, you still had coach and fours driving around.
Well, I should state because this is in the Radnor Historical Society's bulletin from 1986. I mean, just full disclosure here. It makes, let me see if I can find it here for you. This is one of 3 tower houses that was designed by Horace Trumbauer. There's one 2 doors down, and there's one on the other side of Wayne that were all designed by Horace Trumbauer, all built by the same developer in 1892. And it is my understanding, I can't verify this one way or the other, but there is a statement in here that all 3 possess stables, though none are entered in the architect's records. So I can't verify that, but it's a statement that I did read from this. So it is possible that this was there from the start and designed by Horace Trumbauer. I can't verify that one way or the other. Our preoccupation with it has been related to its safety. It's structurally unstable. Second, the whole front of the building has basically been removed. And I could see that immediately when I went up to the 2nd floor because that's one of the reasons it's unstable, I believe. Because you can see that where the porch came in historically, and it's been removed. So there was a whole front to this building that is now gone. And so it sits obviously on the property line basically as well. And the owner doesn't really have a use for it because they can't use it as a garage because of its location. It doesn't make sense for use to have the driveway go the whole way through the backyard to reach it. So that's, for those reasons, the instability, honestly, it looks unstable just because I think that porch has been removed. So that's a little bit of background regarding our discussions with the owner.
Do you have any images of the front that you're talking about?
The historic image that I referred to?
The current image with, you said
Yes.
the front is kind of taken apart?
The current images that we have are in, I mean, you can see it in number 13. That's what it looks like from the street. You can see it on the left-hand side. Because of the topography of the site, you're really mostly seeing the roof of the property from Luella. And then we have number 11. That would be the side where that's what's facing Luella, and that's where the front has been removed. There was a front porch that came out, projected out, we believe, from that facade. And then number 12 is really from the north, kind of looking towards the south corner of the site. So 11, 12, 13 show the garage.
So you're moving it to the other side of the property?
We're not moving it, we're removing it.
You're removing it and locating a garage on the other side of the property.
Correct.
I think it seems to me, in my opinion, and with some guidelines on these things, like the Interior Secretary's guidelines on historic preservation, et cetera, that it is better to repair than replace. And obviously, in your letter, your engineer thinks it is irreparable. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't think he states that it's irreparable. I think it would have to pretty much be rebuilt because most of the framing at the interior would need to be rebuilt, I think is what he's saying. And he couldn't inspect the foundations, which are likely just stone foundations, so we may need to rebuild the foundations as well. I think his letter calls for most of it to be reframed, yes, because of its instability.
Could we take a look at elevation C for a moment, actually C and E and F? I'll tell you, the most striking thing in my mind is the curved timbering, because I'm unfamiliar with seeing the curved timbering with this architect's style, and it struck me as a little bit, excuse me, a little out of place. I liked what you did regarding, excuse me, the rest of the design, but in a few different places, it looks like it's a flourishment that kind of contrasts between the perpendicular timbering that we'd be accustomed to. Do you want to comment on that?
I believe there is some curved timbering on the house itself now. Do you have?
Number 4.
Yeah, number four.
That's a curved timber, and also on the rear elevation, sort of lost behind that tree. But
Right.
on number 9 to the left, there's a curved.
Yeah,
curved brace.
that looks like it's.
It's not as curved, but it is curved. It's not as straight number.
So we were
Okay.
picking up on that from the existing house. But I
Quite a difference between the two. Even if that is curved, and it looks to me as if there are actually two different straight lines at a slightly different angle, it certainly doesn't fit the dramatic nature of what you're proposing for the garage.
Okay.
I have a question about the old structure. Do you need to remove that structure to build this new one? Are they, I mean, I'm questioning why they're in the same application.
Well, I think probably from an impervious standpoint, we may be close if we don't remove it. Is that correct?
I think we got squeak under, but we haven't engineered.
We're engineering it right now. I mean, the engineer is working on that right now. We may still be under if we leave the garage there. The owner's very interested in removing it for safety reasons. They have young children. There's lots of reasons that they're thinking of removing it. They have no use for it. So that they would be interested in removing it as soon as they can. But they're not really, it is possible that we could keep that structure and still do what we plan to do on the other side of the site.
The other question that I had is about the new structure, and do you have sort of or can you give us an idea of the size of that compared to the size of the main house so we can get an idea of the massing of it?
Do we have a? We don't actually have a, I mean, if we were to look primarily at the site plan, which I'm going to. So that gives you a sense of the general mass, this versus this, but if you can see here, the dimension of the garage is actually relatively thin, so the gable is not a high gable. It's not a massive gable in any way. Much of the mass of the structure actually goes back to the west, that's related to the pool building. And the other thing that I would add is the gable on the existing house is actually a massive gable that faces the Luella. It's a very, very strong, and you can kind of see that in photograph. Where's the? Yes, number 1, behind the tower. It's a massive gable. It's really a massive building. You can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 floors of kind of under that gable. With a. Does that make sense? And the building is set back to the very back, or the new garage, proposed garage, is set back to the very back of the house, and also behind the porte cochere.
So just in general, I like the design that you have put together. I think it matches the house, and I think it will probably look quite beautiful. I have a problem saying yes to it just yet because I sort of need an elevation of the property to see the main structure and kind of how this is going to fit in behind it. The other thing is that your architect, or your engineering, your structural engineering company, they don't recommend demolition. And it's very difficult for me to know, well, given that we have an indication of the age of this structure, it's difficult for me to say okay to tearing something down when it can be fixed. That's what I was kind of wondering, if they needed to tear this down to be able to build the new one. But
I'm going to say no, they don't need to tear this
Okay.
down to build the new one. And I think I'm safe in saying that.
Okay.
I feel like the issues for them is unless they were to completely rehab this building, rebuild this building, it's an unsafe structure. So that's really the issue for them. It's not an issue of whether they could build the garage or not. Yes. Sorry.
I'd like to look into this further because John Milner is the architect whom I would normally associate with knowing something like this. In other words, I can't imagine that you wouldn't, with Milner's background. Milner is the architect that people call in when they want to know something like this.
Yes.
You all are supposed to have the background to ascertain something like this. I just can't imagine that you don't know whether it's part of the original tract or that the materials are not original, or something isn't ringing true. And
as I stated, I don't. If I had the proof one way or the other, I would tell you. And we have looked into the history. However, I've read the statement that I have from the Radnor Historical Society, and You know, so I would gather if that statement is correct, which I can't tell you that it's not correct. If that statement is correct, then this was probably built at the same time, likely by Horace Trumbauer.
Well, that would be my thought. And then
But I
I
don't
would
know
have a
that for
greater
sure.
problem with tearing it down. I would like to have Greg's thoughts on this.
Sorry, Greg. Do we have any public comment on this?
Well, just basically from what I was able to dig up in the last 5 minutes, it doesn't appear the carriage house was there before 1897. It appears starting in 1900, so that's within 6 to 7 years of the construction of the house. So it's not. It doesn't seem to be contemporary with the main house. I also looked in our records of the Wendell and Smith ledger book, which was very precise about exactly what they paid Horace Trumbauer to design these houses, and there's no mention of the carriage house. So, pending further information, that's what I can say at this time. I guess my only other comment would be that, the picture, looking through the porte cochere here, the new garage would be visible from there, but there's also a pretty significant amount of property to, I guess it's the north of that. There are big trees there now, but trees die, and so you have to think about what might be visible from that section of the property as well. So that's all I'd say. And I think the architecture is great, so I think it's very compatible, and I wouldn't expect anything less from John Milner and Chris. Okay, thanks.
There is another topic that we haven't been discussing, and I will present it in a public forum. And this is not something that I think applies to you because it is not yet in our ordinance. And it has specifically to do with massing. It is a topic of concern with HARB, is a topic of concern with the Board of Commissioners. And when I look at the structure and the size of the structure, it begins to rival the house. I understand the desire for it. I think that the fact that it's got a dual purpose speaks in its favor. Yet at the same time, it certainly changes the nature of the property. And I guess I'll go and I'll say, I don't think that it's something that we necessarily need to, to restrict upon because it's not currently something that we'd have in the ordinance. However, it is a concern to me.
I didn't put a ruler up against your drawings, but it does seem to me that the frontage of the garage is pretty much equal to the frontage of the house. That the scale of it seems a little too big for what's going on, since it can be visible from the street. If this was totally behind the house and totally not visible, we would totally not care, if that makes sense to you. But we have to be cognizant that the commissioners are very sensitive to the scale of outbuildings, especially pertaining to additions, especially pertaining to garages. And while it gladdens all of us that you are willing to put a detached garage, because we've been campaigning for that for a long time, this one's very big compared to the scale of the house, especially since it can be seen. Do you think that the homeowners would entertain shrinking that footprint a little bit?
Well, let me just look here at the. I mean, one of the things that I guess one of the things that I would say is I'm separating a little bit the massing of the garage and the scale of the garage from that length of the facade that you're referring to. Because that length of the facade sits behind the porte cochere, and it is partially shielded. And the roof is very low. I mean, it's a low building, and it doesn't compare in mass to the mass of the main house and the main facade. I do agree with you that it's a three-car garage, so it has some length to it, but it is shielded from the porte cochere. So that's why I think we felt very comfortable with the massing and the scale of the garage as it relates to the front of the house.
It does seem to me that there's some extra building beyond the actual three-car garage.
There's a pool house behind.
Behind, but there's
Yes.
something labeled storage.
Yes, there's a small addition that has storage and a stair that goes up to an attic space above that's unfinished.
I'd be okay if that went away.
It's kind of it steps down in scale from the garage to that unit and then over to what would be a new side entry into the house. So it's kind of, and that is pretty much completely shielded by the porte cochere, that small. So if we were to remove that, I don't think it would affect the massing of the structure from the street at all, from the public way. We did look, honestly, at reducing the size of it, and we discussed that with the owner. In fact, we had removed that addition in some of our discussions. We really like the way it steps the garage down, provides access to the house. It's also shielded by the porte cochere, so really you don't see it from the road. And it's a relatively low, as you can see in the elevation C, the way it steps down, you wouldn't see it, except sort of visually, maybe pieces of it as you look through.
I think I would ask that you reconsider that little addition. It would reduce the width of the frontage enough that I think it would make a little more sense to me.
I'm not sure that I agree or disagree with that. I just feel like we might just need to see that kind of elevation so that we know for sure. So I want to put it out to the rest of the board that perhaps this is a situation where we could grant a continuance to be able to take a look at the scale of the main house versus this, so that we know that we're making the right decision in that sense. But also, I feel like there might be more information about this structure that you would like to tear down. I feel like there's some unknowns there. I don't know if giving it a little more time we would be able to dig something up, or if, I'm not sure. I don't want to prolong the decision, but I want to make sure we have all the facts in front of us. So I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but.
Again, considering the potential historical significance of this particular architect, and again, a lot of his work is in the local area. When I was a kid, one of our pastimes on like Sundays would be cruising around certain neighborhoods in Philadelphia, looking at beautiful houses. My dad and 5 kiddies. Well, now I know that this architect also designed several houses in Mount Airy, where we went, on Pelham, where I almost bought a house a couple of years ago. But so again, even with that, even with the local history here and the prominence of this particular architect, I think we need to take a second or a third step to see whether or not, that carriage barn is, in fact, possibly a part of the original house in some way. I know what Greg has done on his information, I think helps, but I suggest to take a second step. Just a little more thorough research, just to be sure. Because one of the things we do, we advocate for preservation. And again, if this is a part of this architect who is so historically prominent, we have to take that second look, maybe even perhaps a third look. And I would suggest that your firm does indeed do that.
We're happy to take another look, and I appreciate what Greg's comments, but we're certainly happy to take another look. We're not trying to get anything by you here. But we haven't been able to find anything.
Well, if there is a continuance, I would also ask that you sit down, talk to your clients, talk about some of the other topics that we had discussed. Is there a way to be able to, either reduce the footprint, reduce the frontage? And I understand that there may be some that's obscured, but it's not behind, a complete stone wall.
Right.
Right.
No, it's not.
Right. So,
Not at all.
if there's an opportunity to be able to even swing things that staircase behind, a little bit masked from the public right of way, it might be time well spent.
And I'll just say, I think a lot of that also depends. I think you have a piece of property with a lot of topography on it. So I think showing us that might also indicate that, this is not as large a structure, as seemingly large a structure as it is. But again, we just want to make sure. So does someone want to make a motion?
I move that we offer the applicant a continuance to our November meeting.
I second.
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. All are in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just so you know, you don't have to pay a second fee to come before us again if we offer you continuance.
Yes. Would you like to make that?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion for a 5-minute recess.
I'll second it, and I think we all vote yes. All right, we're going to take a few minutes. About 5, we'll be back. All right, I think everyone is back. We're going to take a look at HARB 2017-20. This is 430 Meadowbrook Avenue, addition to the east facade of the house, replacing a window and a new covered entrance.
Good evening. I'm Scott O'Barr, also with John Milner Architects. And I first need to make a clarification. The east facade has been mislabeled and is actually the west facade. It's simply a labeling mistake. The addition is still in the location that it is shown. The current owners would like to extend the west facade of the house by 18 feet. That's the area shown in red here on the slide here. The width of the new addition is 24 feet, 10 inches. An existing one-story portion of the house, approximately 6 feet 10 by 14 foot 4, will be removed, and that is shown dashed within the red area. That can also be seen on photograph number 11. The exterior material of the addition will be stucco in keeping with the existing material of the house. Double-hung windows to match the scale and proportion of the existing windows on the north facade will be used in the addition on the north and west facades. As well, the existing bow window at the north elevation, photograph number 10, which we think is a later addition from the original house, will be removed and replaced with a more traditional window. In your packet, you'll see a photograph from 1911 from the Western architect. At that corner, here we can see that there is no there's no bow window that's there now that we would like to remove with your approval. I described the south elevation, but the south elevation is not viewed from any public right-of-way. You still have elevations of that in your packet if you'd like to discuss that as well. The house is 1910, 1911, Meller and Meggs, and it is an asymmetrical colonial revival. So I think it's in that edge period that you were talking about. So I would open it up for questions or comments.
I know you show it in dashed lines, but could you tell me how big is the addition that's being removed?
Sure. If you look at photograph 11, you'll see there's a 4-light window with a pair of shutters. You'll see a column. That entire one-story addition will be removed in our scenario. 6 feet 10 out from the house and roughly 14 feet.
So you're really only going 12 feet then?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
I was a little confused by the elevation from the side because it looks like part of the window is being cut off. Is that, am I looking at that incorrectly?
You're looking at that correctly. The window would not be cut off. We'd be building a metal pan within the new addition. I assume you're referring to elevation.
It's the proposed east elevation.
Sure. Yes, if you'll notice, there's a dashed line of the window beyond. There will be a metal pan in the roof to save that window. With the geometry of the roof and aligning with the existing, unless we were to bring that dramatically down, then that would cut into the height of the first floor.
So on the north elevations, it looks like you're going to lose a small window? No, proposed, you're adding another small window.
We are proposing to add a small window in an existing stairwell. It's the back service stair.
The other question I had was the topography of the land. It looks in the top image on the north elevation that it does slope down a bit, so you'll be seeing some foundation.
Correct.
And is there other exposed foundation that you're going to be matching to that, or what's the?
Yes, if you look at the proposed north elevation, currently there is a stone foundation, and then it changes to stucco at the first floor. We're suggesting to create a 1 to 2 inch bump out to mimic that stone, but then have the material be stucco on CMU as it advances in the addition. The existing house has considerable plantings at the base. The stone foundation, which does wrap the house, cannot be seen unless you're actually up on to the house, and it's maybe 8 to 12 inches at most.
Did they consider continuing the stone foundation, or at least the look of the stone foundation?
We did consider that. Yeah, it was a cost issue currently.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Still looking at it? Any comment from the public on this property?
I'd like to make a motion for recommendation for a certificate of appropriateness.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? We have 4 in favor. I am not going to vote yes on this simply because I feel that the stone foundation should be wrapped, just for future public to know that. But you have your certificate for the board. Thank you. And last but not least, we have HARB 2017-21. This is 111 Walnut Avenue with a new 2-story addition at the rear of the existing house.
So, hello, my name is Aaron Boyd. I'm with Gardner Fox, and we're proposing an addition at the rear of the house. If you consider it a rear, I mean, there's really two. This is a corner lot. It has 2 front yards. one on Walnut and one on Oak Lane. There's also a detached garage, which is over here. And the core of the house is toward Walnut. And our proposal is to, with the two-story addition at the rear of the house, to maintain the 10 feet between the existing garage and the new addition. And then the other thing that we're looking to do is, right now the building doesn't conform to the current side yard setbacks. So we were looking at this, and the existing bay window that's on the side of the house is about 7 feet from the property line. So where we're proposing to build the addition, we're planning to not go any closer than the 7 feet. And we were maintaining the side face of the building on this side toward the neighbor, so we won't get any closer. So we have a zoning hearing in a couple weeks to go through those type of setback issues. So this is a Japanese house. There's some historic photos. I talked with Greg a little bit, and I also went to the Radnor Historic Society. I was able to pull some images. This is it under construction, and this is the view from Oak Lane, and this is Walnut over here. And this existing neighbor house is no longer there. It was demolished. But for the most part, the house has hipped roofs, but they're not only hipped, they're curved. So it has a very dramatic effect, very beautiful, very hard to build too. So that's kind of the core of the house, has hipped roofs, this curved shed roof. Also on the side, there's a lower pitch hipped roof with a little dormer. But on the back of the house, toward the detached garage, there's actually a gable. So that's this piece right here. So I have a current photo of that gable. So in this image, that's kind of dark on the screen, but there's a gabled roof. I have it as slide 15 in your packet. That is over one of the bedrooms at the rear of the house. So part of the design, and I also have a 3D model. So we oh, sure, yeah. Sure. Okay, all right. Okay, then I'll talk conceptually about the inside. Okay, so this is the Walnut Avenue is on this side, and Oak curves around. So you end up with a two front yards, and this on the side is the gabled piece. So inside that gabled piece are kind of subservient pieces like closets, bathrooms, mudrooms, you know, that kind of thing. I'm not going to show you the plan of that, but the on this side facing Oak are more open spaces. The owners want to have a master suite, family room space, and given the way the site is, the main part of the yard that they think that they would enjoy the most with this new addition would be this area in here. So with that in mind, they wanted to look at adding more glass to that facade than some of the other facades. So in looking at the existing elevations, there's a certain size window that is consistent throughout the building, and then there's some other elements with dormers and smaller bathrooms and things that are different. But if you look at the second floor, like this window here, that has it's an 8 light with over 2 lights, and that particular window is repeated all the way around the house. So, and they're in this case they're singles. So you can see they're all singles. The only time that they have multiple windows usually are when they're in a bay window. So you can see like on the side elevation here, there's a bay window. This reads on the outside as kind of how the stair, is working on the inside and communicating to the outside. So you can see there's a lot of this size window that is repeated around the building. So with the addition, what we were looking to do was with this extruded gable, the existing gable was back here, we extruded it out. We continued some of the single windows, but when we got around the side toward Oak Lane, what we wanted to look at was how could we get more light into these spaces, since this was going to be the main view toward this yard area. So what we did was we took the size window that exists on the house and repeated it in modules. So this is a double instead of a single. And then on the first floor, we have a series of 4 windows that come across and then a glass door. So there is a lot of glass on that Oak Lane elevation. Also, what we wanted to do was express, this was the service part with closets and bathrooms and that kind of thing. The master bedroom space is this gable here, so we were planning to have a vaulted space in that area. And there's, we looked at doing a double window that would be above the bed wall that would let light into that vaulted space. The addition is about 475 feet. We wanted to stay under 500. The existing house, the footprint is 1187. So it's smaller than the house. It's also shorter.
Can I offer a couple of comments here?
Sure, yeah.
First of all, this house is situated on a very prominent corner. Also, too, this is from Zillow. The house was somewhat recently bought.
Yes.
And as far as the ad on Zillow, it states, this grand and gracious 3-story Victorian, constructed in 1888, is a standard bearer for North Wayne's stunning architectural history, and is one of only 3 shingle-style homes of this model gracing Walnut Avenue. Don't miss this opportunity to live in the original Wayne estate, published in 1888, as a place of homes where life is felt, seen, and enjoyed in actuality. Now, as far as this new addition goes, in my opinion, this classically illustrates a question of massing, and not positive massing. When I looked at the dimensions, as you mentioned, the new addition is 475 square feet. The existing house, 1187 square feet. The addition is circa 40% of the existing house's square footage. So again, in my opinion, I think this classically illustrates a situation of what we're trying to work with in the historic districts on questions of negative massing. Your thoughts?
I would like to address the design. The house is almost all hipped roof. The addition has none. There's only one gable in the back of the house, and it's gable, 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 gable everywhere.
Yes.
You really have not taken very many design cues from this tremendously unique house. You're basically putting a very modern addition on an extremely historic house. I would be very sad to see that. If you would like to work with your owners to discuss the notion of making the addition look like it was always part of the house, taking the roof cues especially, the materials cues especially. If you look at the original house, the first story is all stone. It's all stone. I'm sure it's not stone facade.
Yeah, it has some lap siding on the back, and then it changes over to the cedar, and it also has this really neat kick-out detail that you see a lot on Walnut Avenue and a lot of the other houses we looked at.
But none of that is reflected in the addition.
Well, it is reflected in the addition. What's not reflected is what you've pointed out, which is the gabled piece. We basically extruded the one gable that was in the back, and then we added another gable. So we have an alternative roof line that we were looking at. And so I brought that along with me to show you what that would look like as a hipped roof as opposed to a gabled roof. The other thing, I didn't, with the challenge of building, the hip roof isn't so much a challenge, it's curved and hipped. So I don't know if maybe it would be okay to explore just doing a hipped roof as opposed to a curved and hipped roof for the addition hat piece on the back. Another thing we were considering was if you look at this gable and you look at this, oh, I'm sorry, yeah. So if you look at this gable over here, if this roof were to continue through and hip and kind of clip off the gable, which, you know, might be peaking a little bit too high, and then on this side, we ended up doing another hip just above these double windows. It might help bring the scale, that kind of ties into your massing comment down. And also the other thing I was going to discuss with the owners was would they be willing to maybe look at single windows here on the second floor as opposed to double, because you can see how much glass takes up that facade. And then if you look at the other side of the house, wherever they had multiple windows, it was inside of a bay window. So what I looked at was an alternative version of this that kind of brings the scale of the addition down. And it really doesn't change the plan all that much. But you can see this piece doesn't become as dominant as the main house. You know, it's subservient to it. So we have some work, you know, that we could do to explore some, you know, other ways of...
I think your alternative is moving in the right direction. Right now, to me, this looks like you're building a slightly smaller house right next to a house, and you're building a modern house next to an old house. So I don't want to use too many descriptive terms, but it sort of looks ridiculous. You've got totally different windows. You've got totally different roof lines. I mean, there's nothing that I see that's really drawing the two halves of this house together. You're also creating another front door. So it looks like now the house has two front door areas. And then the massing, of course, is a concern because it looks like an entirely extra house sitting next to a current house. So I think as I said, I think that you're moving in the right direction with some of the alternatives, but I don't know that that's what was submitted, so I'm not sure that that's what we can exactly vote on.
Right.
Well, one other comment I would like to make that your plans came with neighbor recommendations, and it seems like those neighbors are right within the immediate area, and they were positive about this. But I think we also have to balance how other neighbors may feel that aren't directly there or might not know about that this property is coming before our board. To also keep that in mind too, that I think we have to be aware of that, other people. Also too, in your plan, and I just wanted to illustrate this because I saw this many months ago when I first came on this board, and you use it as an example for an addition for this house. That's 401 Oak Avenue. That's also on a corner. But in my opinion, and this was before our time as a HARB, classically illustrates the whole question of negative massing, where it looks like two houses that are attached together to a house which is historically prominent and on a corner. So I just wanted to share those observations with you and the rest of the board.
I have one other comment. When you buy a house like this, please tell this to your owners. This is our message. When you buy a house like this, you accept the responsibility of making sure that whatever you do does not compromise the look of the place. We don't particularly want to discourage any economic investment in our neighborhoods, but we are here to safeguard against something that does not look like what it is supposed to match. You haven't used similar building materials, windows, roof lines. You give the owners the space, but 10 feet is not very far from, 10 feet is not a long distance from that garage. And we would like to see a different design before we give them approval to expand.
I also have to comment on the letters that were submitted. They all start with, "It is our understanding." So I don't know that they've even seen the plans that have been shown to us, because all of these are worded exactly the same, and it all says that is their understanding that the plans will be in the historical character and integrity of the neighborhood. So this, to me, might be support for the zoning board and that piece of it, but this doesn't provide me with any confidence that the neighbors truly have seen this modern addition and are in agreement to it, because they're saying that it's our understanding. They haven't looked at anything, or have they? I mean, that's what all these letters say, is that they haven't looked at anything.
We went over the design with the owners, and then they went to the neighbors with the to look at letters of support, and I'm assuming that they shared the plans with them, but I'm not, I wasn't present when that occurred.
Is there any public comment on this project?
A few points. Well, first of all, I want to thank Aaron and Gardner Fox for getting in touch with us and doing some good research on this house. This is one that we had an unusually large amount of information on. Because it's on that prominent corner, it was very well documented during the construction of the neighborhood and shortly after. So I wish everyone would do that kind of research and due diligence. So thanks for that. I want to emphasize, and it's been pointed out, this is a prominent corner, and not just that, but I think the back of this house is actually viewed more often than the front. This Oak Lane, for anyone who lives up from Oak Lane, when you walk to Wayne, when kids walk to school, to the middle school, they go down Oak Lane, and the back of the house is the most prominent thing on the block, just about. I think, I can't, with the first design anyway, it sort of reminds me of a Robert Venturi little house colliding with the Japanese house. And, there's nothing wrong with great postmodern architecture. And, I could picture that section on the beach in Nantucket kind of, but I don't really think it belongs in that location. I think the second design is, like you say, a step in the right direction. But the massing, the way that it interacts, and the roof lines, I think those are all important elements. I'm not really sure why the third story of the addition, which I suppose is empty space above the master suite, has to be so high. It's perpendicular to the massing of the house, and it really looks like it sort of collides with it. But again, if you're not familiar with the block, I would suggest parking on Beech Tree and taking a walk down and seeing exactly how visible that part of the house is on the block.
I would like to go and say that, yes, I do agree, because I saw that. When you're there, and in the back of the house it's all visible. I would say a good 3/4 of that house on that corner are all visible in the public view. I've seen it on foot, so I wanted to reinforce your observation.
Great. And I believe that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
It would greatly, I'm sure, add to the owner's convenience of living, but sometimes you destroy value in the house when you do an addition like this, because you've destroyed its unique architecture. And that happens so much more often than people realized. But that would be my comment, that they moved there because it's a wonderful neighborhood, but then found that things aren't always convenient in a Victorian house, and I live in one. I can attest to that. But from a value standpoint, you can really hurt the value grievously in many instances when you make that kind of a change.
We could put this up for vote for continuance. Are you interested in that, or
Yes,
should we?
yes.
Okay.
We wanted to try to tie this in better and look at scaling it down.
I move that we offer 2017-21, the chance for continuance to a meeting in the future. I'm not sure that your designs could necessarily be ready for our next meeting, since you're going to have a lot of back and forth with your owner.
What's the next deadline?
It's in a couple of weeks.
You'd have to submit by October 18th.
Okay.
So if I would be willing to offer you a continuance for 3 months.
Okay.
3 months. We all good? So that would be after the turn of the year, to give you some chance for the gravitas of the situation to really sink in. If building those hipped roofs and a curved hip roof to match the other curved hip roof is prohibitively expensive, then we would understand that an addition is not right for this house, for this owner.
Do we second the motion for continuance?
I second.
All those in favor of granting it continuance, excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have a continuance. Does he have to come to the next meeting, or does he have time? Is it whenever? Okay.
Okay.
So good
Thank
luck.
you very much for your time.
Remember, it's a responsibility.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point in time, do we have some old business?
Very quickly, the report on the harbor ordinance update. Miles and I are going to be meeting next week to discuss the convening of a committee to review the changes that we decide are necessary. I was able to print out for you the report that everyone requested last month of the text of my report, and I am joyously also able to provide to you this document, which is a summary of my discussion with each one of the commissioners on the basic questions, so you can see what they said. I had some terrible computer problems last time. My hard drive was very sick, and I finally got the reconstruction of it, and I was able to give this to you. So this is all of the questions that we agreed we should ask them, and these are a summary of their responses. I think you'll find it interesting. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Is there any comments on that? Any other old business? If not, we'll move into public participation. Anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, just briefly, sort of in line with the ordinance amendment, some members of the Historical Society, and this is not a Historical Society function, we're just interested residents, have been considering for some time the possible adoption of an ordinance to protect scattered sites through the township. In Lower Merion, for example, there's an historical commission, which is separate from the HARB, which evaluates projects involving some of the really most extraordinary structures in the township which aren't within the historic districts. And we've been thinking about this for a while. It takes some time and some political wrangling to try to get it on the docket, but it's something that we're committed to, and hopefully we can work with you guys to help make that happen. Maybe not in the near term, but going forward in the months or years ahead.
Just to let you know that that is absolutely on the radar screen of the commissioners. They are all interested in protecting scattered sites. There's 2 comments that I'd like to bring to you and to take back to the people who are considered. The first comment is that it can appear to be arbitrary and capricious. That's of, I think, the greatest concern is that it can't be applied willy-nilly, because that will leave the township open to suit, and that, of course, is not what they want. The other thing is that we have to be very clear that the scattered sites protection wouldn't protect buildings from razing. We, as a HARB, are really only charged with evaluating the exterior features that can be seen from the street. The commissioners don't really want to get into anything deeper than that. That every one of them made clear. So as long as the people that you're working with understand that the HARB ordinance cannot and probably will not ever protect a building from being razed, I think that scattered sites are very, very, very important to the commissioners.
Well, that's good to hear. And I would note that many of those sites or buildings on those sites are far from the road. And typically, when you're evaluating things from a public way, properties from a public way, it's within the district because the entire neighborhood is considered the resource. And in terms of the selection of properties to be listed on an inventory, the township did pay a consultant in 2003, 2004 to come up with a list of properties, and it was an expansion of the list created for the 1988 comprehensive plan. There's been some more research done into those properties, and I think if there were guidelines established, in Lower Merion we have 10 guidelines that if a property is to be considered for the list, that it would meet 3 of those criteria at least. And that's, I think, a good way to potentially come up with a process and of designation that is based on some written criteria rather than people's personal feelings and opinions.
Would you email that to me, please? I know you have my email. Would you email that to me, please, those
ordinance?
scattered site guidelines?
From Lower Merion?
From Lower Merion, yeah.
Yes,
I'd be very
be happy
anxious
to.
to see them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Greg, it's also good to know that some folks at the Radnor Historical Society are also interested in like taking these scattered sites forward, because I think the more input we have from the public and from various organizations in the community, the better. When I think of a scattered site that I think will require more and more protection, if you will, that isn't totally visible from street level, and considering everything that's going on there currently for the community in various ways, is the Willows.
Right. Well, since it's within a park, the driveways within and the parkland itself could be considered public view. So that's an example. You know, a place like Ardrossan, which a couple of years ago wasn't visible from the public way. I'm not sure if any of the roads going into the new development make it more visible, but you know, that's an example of something that with that criteria would not have been protected at all.
One other thing, as you go through this with the other Historical Society members, if you continue to develop lists of those that would be potential scattered sites, please share them with us.
Yeah, I don't think we're at the stage of coming up with a list. I think that should be, well, I'm not really sure what that process should be, but you know, establishing the criteria and then figuring out which of the criteria each applies to each of those properties being considered is, I think, the best way to handle it. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 1st, and this meeting is adjourned.